This is Far From Home. I'm Scott Gurian, and I'm thrilled to say that 2020, this terrible, horrible, no good, very bad year, has finally come to an end. If you're a longtime listener to this podcast, you know that during normal times, I tend to do a fair amount of traveling. In fact, I had a big, exciting trip to Africa planned for this past spring, but of course, all that got canceled. So I've instead spent the past year here at home in New Jersey. All this time, my passport has been tucked away in a drawer, my luggage was stored in a closet in my basement, and my frequent flyer points are sitting idle. Now, I should say that I'm still safe and healthy, which are the most important things, and that's more than many people have right now, so I'm not complaining too much. But since this is a program about travel, it's kind of hard to avoid talking about the fact that this has been a lengthy period of time when travel hasn't really been possible. And to be honest, it's taken some creativity at times for me to continue putting out episodes of the show, but I hope you've enjoyed what I've been able to do these past number of months. This third season of Far From Home has turned out far different than I expected it would when I was planning things at the beginning of 2020, and COVID-19 still seemed like a problem that just affected China. As we're all looking forward to the new year and returning to pre-pandemic life that's hopefully not too far in the future, I thought I'd end this season by transporting all of you to a place I was last year at this time on the final trip I took before all this started. I was in Puerto Rico visiting my friend Rob, who some of you might remember from the very first season of this podcast when I consulted him to get advice about what kind of car I should drive to Mongolia. Rob now lives in Puerto Rico with his wife and 5-year-old son, and he took me along to a parranda, which is sort of like a Puerto Rican version of Christmas caroling. But as you'll hear, this particular parranda had an interesting twist.
Okay, la primera canción.
It was shortly before dusk when I arrived in what was normally a quiet residential San Juan neighborhood of palm trees and concrete pastel-colored homes. This guy named Will was standing in a driveway before a group of about a dozen young kids and their parents about to start an informal rehearsal. Some of them were wearing straw hats and holding small instruments like tambourines, and while they seemed excited for the festivities, it was clear they needed some practice. Their first attempt was laughably bad, but these were 5- and 6-year-olds after all, and they'd get better as the night wore on. At first glance, this seemed like the sort of parranda that people all over Puerto Rico might participate in around this time of year. My friend Rob explained how it worked.
Basically, people get together and go from house to house and sing songs, and then they're provided with food and drink and whatnot, and it's very much a traditional thing.
And so they've got all instruments for the kids here, yeah. Maracas and what are these instruments?
Claves, which are just two sticks that meant to use to keep the beat. And then guido. I mean, these are modern ones that you get at the drugstore, but the traditional ones are made out of like a hollowed out gourd. And then you use like a device to kind of scrape it, and that gives it that scraping sound. It's very typical of a parranda.
So I guess in theory the way it's supposed to work is like people start out at someone's house, then they go to the next person's house, and they're supposed to like surprise them. Then that person joins in the crowd, and then they go to the next house.
Yeah, but I don't think it works that way anymore. You know, everybody knows they're coming, but I'm sure there are some like that.
There was something unusual about this particular parranda, though.
There's a small Japanese community on the island, very small, like numbers probably 100 or less, like out of 3.2 million people. And my wife is one of them, and this family is another half Japanese, half Puerto Rican family. They're really kid-friendly, and they like to do a lot of activities, and so this is a very unique parranda in that it's a Japanese Puerto Rican parranda.
It turned out that Will, the song leader, grew up in Puerto Rico, but was part Chinese and part Dominican, and his wife was Japanese. Their 7-year-old and twin 6-year-old sons were among the small crowd that had gathered. After hearing the kids rehearse, I was wondering at first whether they'd be able to learn all these songs, but Will assured me not to worry.
Everybody sings in the parranda. Usually they're simple because they just keep repeating. So people, after they get drunk, it's okay because it's the same thing over and over and over.
So we have just exited his house now that we're done rehearsing, and we are walking down the block. What we're supposed to be doing is sneaking up to one of the neighbors' houses, and we're supposed to surprise them with singing. So he keeps telling everyone to be quiet. It's a bit hard with a bunch of young kids. We're trying our best. This is like herding cats here. And we're walking up to the front of their house. Okay, they're getting ready, standing in a line. He's counting off.
A la una, a la dos, y a la tres. Saludos, saludos, venga a saludar. Saludos, saludos, venga a saludar.
They began singing Saludos, Saludos. We're coming to offer our greetings. And while they still weren't perfect, it sounded like their practice earlier had actually paid off. Oh, here they come. They turn on the lights. They're finally coming out. The guy has a pillow. He's pretending like we woke him up. He's yawning. He's pretending to yawn. He's thanking us for coming. And then it was time for the next song. Si no me dan de beber, lloro. If they don't give me a drink, I'll cry, everyone sang, which I have to admit was a bit funny coming from a group of 5 and 6-year-olds. The neighbor with the pillow unlocked his gate and invited everyone into his courtyard, where he had a table set up with soft drinks and chips, as well as a bowl full of grapes, which we were all supposed to eat to bring good luck and prosperity in the coming year. I wasn't very hungry, but Will encouraged me to eat.
Hey, help yourself.
If you don't, you'll screw the tradition, he joked.
Screw the tradition. So you gotta go help yourself, go.
We stayed for a little while. The guy who lived there showed the kids the model train he had set up around his Christmas tree, and he told them about holiday traditions in other parts of the world. Eventually, it was time to move on. Okay, we're saying goodbye to him now, and we're all wandering out and heading to the next house. Back out on the street, my friend Rob told me that he had memories of going to parrandas as a young kid in his Puerto Rican neighborhood of Jersey City, New Jersey. But now that he was experiencing it again as an adult, he appreciated it much more. You know some of these songs?
Yes,
like
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I grew up listening to it all the time. This music is traditional Christmas music, but even like the traditional folk music, my parents weren't into salsa, they weren't into merengue, they were into this kind of stuff.
I guess it's so much more authentic being back here, actually in Puerto Rico. Are you glad that you're raising your son in this?
Absolutely, because another thing I noticed is that my Puerto Rican cultural heritage was stuck in like the people that came in the 50s and 60s, and it was sort of stunted.
Because that's when Rob's parents moved from the island to the States.
It was before social media and whatnot. So I come here, and yes, I'm descendant of a Puerto Rican family, but I mean, I feel like to be from someplace is to know the cultural references, the jokes, the inside jokes. So I'm really glad that my son is going to have that cultural reference that I didn't have and kind of be more in touch with his culture.
There seems to be a generational thing that, like for years and years, there were traditions that people's grandparents brought or foods they cooked or whatever. And that kind of stuff went out of fashion, and people are like, we don't want to repeat those traditions, we don't want to continue to learn the languages they spoke. And it just seems like over the last decade or so, maybe it just looks that way to me, but it seems like people are reconnecting with their traditions and their families. I don't know.
I think it all depends. In my family in particular, we must have, of my generation of cousins, is probably 13 or 14 of us. Only 3 of us can speak Spanish with any kind of skill. I would say I'm like 85% fluent. I mean, I conduct business in Spanish, but I make mistakes, and any Puerto Rican will know in about 2 minutes that my parents are Puerto Rican, but I wasn't raised here. But for me, it was very important. My parents definitely exposed us, my brother and I, and then, I was the one that kind of took to it and always kind of liked the traditions of it. And so I definitely want to expose my son to that, and to the other side of his family, which is Japanese.
After walking a bit, we got to the next house, and it was time for the part of the parranda that everyone seemed to enjoy the most, the bomba. The way it worked was that they'd sing the chorus of the song, then point to a random person in the crowd who had to come up with some sort of little rhyme off the top of their head. My Spanish isn't great, so I didn't totally understand it, but Rob explained.
They're just like silly sayings. So like, si la mar fuera cerveza y el río fuera ron, yo me lo pasaría nadando como un campeón. If the ocean was beer and the river was rum, I would pass it swimming like a champion, right? And it's just like silly sayings.
We had some more snacks and refreshments, and then the group sang its goodbyes while heading out the door to the third house, where Will's mother, Mildred, lived. After introducing herself, she got right to business, offering me some pistachio-flavored pitoro, or Puerto Rican moonshine. Like most people, she had a connection, she told me, as well as some homemade coquito, or Puerto Rican eggnog.
Can you believe I've been in Puerto Rico all this time and I have not had coquito yet?
When you go to my house, you're going to coquito and pitoro, because I have pitoro and coquito.
Okay, good. I was worried that this was just for the kids. There wouldn't be any alcohol.
But don't worry. I have a special place there that we can have. Yes.
She escorted me to her refrigerator and poured me a bit of each.
Ooh, that's strong. Whoa. Fuerte.
Yeah.
Rob joked that I could use the pitoro to power my car, and that if I dumped it on the lawn, it would probably kill the grass. Mildred explained how important this time of year is in Puerto Rican culture, and that it's not just Christmas Day, but rather a series of holidays, including Holy Innocents' Day and Three Kings Day.
We celebrate everything. We start on Thanksgiving, and maybe the last day of January, we stop our Christmas.
Wow.
We love that. And we love this stuff, family, kids. It's our culture. It's our reason to be Puerto Rican. That's very important.
Her son Will agreed and told me he would continue to do whatever he could to keep the parranda tradition alive.
A lot of people don't do it anymore because, it's easier to just stay at home, watch TV, and do it simpler. But, this way we reconnect with the community, with the family, with the friends, and, it's fun. We're trying to bring it back and have our kids live it, remember it, embrace it, and then in the future they can do it again with their families and their friends.
And why is it important for you to instill this in them?
Yeah, it's important for them to recognize their cultures, their multicultural kids. That makes them special and unique.
Thanks so much to my friend Rob for hosting me when I was in Puerto Rico last December. You could follow Far From Home on Instagram or Facebook to see photos from the parranda I attended. Hope all of you have a wonderful holiday, whatever it is you celebrate, and thanks for listening to this past season of the podcast. I'm going to take a break for a few months, but I'll continue popping into your feed from time to time with some bonus content. My show's logo comes from Polemic, which designs award-winning experiences all over the world at the intersection of culture, commerce, and community. Find out how they could help your business at polemicdesign.com. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope 2021 is a better year for all of us.